Who was Lady Margaret Beaufort? You might have heard of her. You know, Henry VII. But that's a pretty dismissive way of describing one of the most formidable women in English history. Born in 1443, Margaret Beaufort was a member of the once powerful Beaufort family and a direct descendant of John of Gaunt, the favorite son of Edward III. By the time she was 12 years old, she was a pawn in the game of royal marriages, first to Edmund Tudor, then to the recently crowned King Henry VI, and at just 13 years old, she gave birth to Henry Tudor, future King Henry VII, nearly dying in the process. From that moment on, Margaret's entire world revolved around the devotion to her son and his future. She steered clear of the religious wars known as the Wars of the Roses, which raged between the two rival branches of the Plantagenet dynasty, the houses of Lancaster and York, by refusing to choose sides. Instead, she survived by throwing her weight behind whichever side her son's future depended on. She secretly bought out powerful figures from both sides, all the while plotting with them to secure her son's claim to the throne. When the first Lancastrian king died in 1461, Margaret ensured that the throne went to her son by marrying him to Elizabeth of York, the daughter of Edward IV, uniting the two warring factions and laying claim to the throne as the first Tudor monarch. In 1485, she played a key role in the rebellion that ended Richard III's reign and led to the Battle of Bosworth, where Henry VII defeated Richard III, ending the Wars of the Roses and establishing the Tudor dynasty. Though she wasn't present at the battle, she spent the day praying for Henry's victory, knowing that her son's success would make her the first lady of the realm. Once Henry was crowned king, Margaret became known as My Lady the King's Mother, a title that carried with it the powers and privileges of near-queenly status. As such, she acted as a political advisor to her son, ran her own court, and had immense administrative authority, which she used to entrench the power of the new dynasty and enrich her family. She also remained deeply religious throughout her life, becoming a significant benefactor of the church and a key patron of the arts and education, founding two colleges at Cambridge, Christ's College and St. John's College, which both remain to this day. Margaret Beaufort died in 1509, just days after the coronation of her grandson, Henry VIII. Having lived long enough to see her son firmly established on the throne and his dynasty secure, she is remembered as the woman who laid the foundations for the House of Tudor and quite possibly saved her son's life on more than one occasion. Without her, there may never have been a Tudor era. This has been Lady Margaret Beaufort in 100 seconds. If you want to learn more about the Tudors, stay tuned. Who was the most powerful woman in England during the War of the Roses? No, it wasn't Queen Elizabeth Woodville, wife of King Edward IV. It was none other than Lady Margaret Beaufort, formidable mother of King Henry VII and the woman who laid the foundations for the Tudor dynasty. Margaret was born in 1443 to the noble house of Somerset, but her father died when she was just 2 years old, leaving her mother, Lady Margaret de Beaufort, to raise her and her 3 brothers on her own. Money was tight, so at the age of 13, Margaret was sent to live with her uncle, the Bishop of Winchester, and received an elite education for women at the time, studying everything from theology to astronomy. She even tutored the young princes in the household, earning the nickname She-Fox from King Henry VI due to her sharp wit and intelligence. By the time she was 15, she was ready for marriage, and her mother quickly arranged a match for her with the wealthy Earl of Richmond, who would become King Henry VII. The two were married for a decade and had 1 son together. But Margaret's marriage was not a happy one. She clashed with her husband's arrogant and controlling mother, and after her father-in-law died, she had to flee to London with her young son in the middle of the night to escape the wrath of the new king, Edward IV, who blamed Margaret for her father's death. It was during this time that Margaret honed her political skills, raising money and building alliances for her son's future claim to the throne. She also had a brief but passionate affair with a man named John Whiteville, who became the father of her second son, making Henry's claim to the throne through this second son. However, Margaret kept this second son hidden for most of his life to protect Henry's claim. When Henry finally came into power, he rewarded his mother with the title of Queen, and she played a key role in shaping his early reign. She was a devout Christian and a patron of the arts, but she was also a shrewd politician who knew how to get what she wanted. She died in 1509, having lived a long and influential life. And when Henry VIII came to power 2 years later, he too would rely heavily on his mother's advisors, continuing her legacy of shaping the monarchy. So if you want to learn more about the fascinating world of the Tudors, stay tuned for more information. Henry VII is often remembered as one of England's most infamous monarchs. He overthrew Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field, ending the Wars of the Roses and establishing the Tudor dynasty, which would rule England for over a century. But he didn't do it alone. Henry VII had a formidable ally in his rise to power, his mother, Lady Margaret Beaufort. Hello everyone, welcome to this house. Today we are exploring what role Lady Margaret Beaufort played in the creation of the Tudor dynasty. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an exciting episode. Margaret was born on May 23, 1443, at Bledsoe Abbey in Somerset. Her father was John Beaufort, Earl of Somerset, and her mother was Margaret Holland, whose family could trace their lineage back to Edward III. At the time of her birth, Margaret was illegitimate, as her parents were not married. However, when she was just 6 months old, her parents wed and she became legitimate. This made her a first cousin once removed of King Edward IV. When Margaret was just 2 years old, her father died, leaving her mother a wealthy widow, and so Margaret grew up surrounded by luxury, which continued when she married Sir Thomas Stanley, a longtime ally of the crown, when she was only 13 years old. The wedding took place at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle. 5 years later, she gave birth to her only child, a son, Henry. Soon after Henry's birth, Margaret's mother she chose Edmund Tudor, who was the half-brother of King Henry VI. Through this marriage, Margaret gained another powerful connection to the royal family, as well as an additional source of income, as her stepfather was made Duke of Somerset. Margaret also had 2 stepbrothers through this union with Edmund, Jasper, and Arthur Tudor. But despite her advantageous position in society, life was not all pleasantness for Margaret. In 1461, the Wars of the Roses erupted into open warfare. When Edward IV deposed King Henry VI, Margaret's stepfather and brothers suffered greatly. Jasper was killed at the Battle of Wakefield in 1460, where the Lancastrians attempted to restore Henry to the throne. A year later, Edmund and Margaret fled to Brittany in France, where they lived in exile for the next few years. Meanwhile, Margaret's husband Talmas remained loyal to Edward IV. In 1469, an uneasy truce was called between Edward IV and Queen Elizabeth, the wife of Henry VI. As a result of this peace agreement, Margaret and her husband were able to return from exile to England, bringing Henry with them. They settled down at their mansion, and as a young boy, Henry would have been aware of his noble lineage, but he was too young to play a significant role in court. We know very little about Henry's childhood, but we do know that he was educated at home until he was sent away to be educated at the courts of other nobles. It was here that he learned the skills necessary to run the kingdom. Meanwhile, Margaret's second cousin, Edward IV, continued to rule England. As a young man, he married Elizabeth, the daughter of Richard Neville, Earl of Salisbury, creating yet another powerful alliance. Upon his accession to the throne, Edward bestowed Margaret's uncle, Jasper Tudor, the title of Duke of Bedford, a prestigious position which came with great wealth. However, this did not last long, as Edward's brother Richard deposed him and seized the throne in 1483. The new king wasted no time in stamping out any opposition to his reign, including Margaret's uncle. Soon after Richard's coronation, Jasper was executed on false charges of treason. With the ascent of Richard III to the throne, Margaret's position in society became precarious. Although she had done nothing wrong, she feared for her own safety and the safety of her son. As a result, she decided to flee to Brittany in France, where she reunited with her former stepfather, Edmund Tudor, who was now the first Marquis of Dorset. With the support of her family, Margaret felt safe in exile. Furthermore, she enjoyed a comfortable life, thanks to the generosity of King Charles VIII of France, who provided her with lodging in the palace of the prince in Paris. Additionally, her former spouse, Thomas Stanley, remained loyal to her and played a pivotal role in securing her financial stability during this time. However, disaster struck when news arrived of her son Henry being taken prisoner at the Battle of Stoke in 1487. Despite the turmoil in her personal life, Margaret remained steadfast in her commitment to the safety of her son. She refused to abandon him, even though her brother-in-law, the Marquis of Dorset, urged her to leave without him and seek refuge in England. Instead, she devised a daring plan to rescue Henry from his captors. She assembled a group of men and set off on a mission to bring her son back to safety. The journey was perilous, fraught with danger and uncertainty, but Margaret's determination never wavered. Finally, she succeeded in rescuing Henry and returned him to Paris, where they were reunited at the palace. Their bond had been strengthened by the ordeal, and their love for each other deepened. Once Henry was rescued, Margaret knew that she had to get him back to England as soon as possible. She had heard rumors that Richard III was planning to execute him, so she and Henry embarked on a secret journey back to England in disguise. After enduring a difficult crossing, they arrived in Yorkshire and made their way to Truworth Abbey, where Margaret's brother-in-law, Sir William Yelverton, provided them with sanctuary. From there they travelled to see Margaret's cousin, the Earl of Northumberland, who helped them lay the groundwork for a rebellion against Richard III. On August 22, 1485, Richard III met his demise at the Battle of Bosworth field, marking the end of the Wars of the Roses. Henry Tudor emerged victorious from the battle, claiming the throne as King Henry VII. Margaret's son, Henry VII, wasted no time in cementing his power. One of his first acts as king was to marry Elizabeth of York, the daughter of Edward IV, thus uniting the two warring factions and putting an end to the animosity that had divided the kingdom. This strategic move not only secured Henry's position, but also paved the way for a lasting peace. Following the wedding, Henry and Elizabeth set out to repair the damage wrought by the Wars of the Roses. They worked tirelessly to heal the wounds of the past, reaching out to those who had suffered during the conflict and offering them support and solace. Elizabeth, in particular, was known for her compassion and generosity, visiting the sick and the poor, and providing them with food and medicine. Together, they created a sense of unity and purpose, steering the country towards a brighter future. After their public union, Henry and Elizabeth retreated to the privacy of their chambers where they consummated their marriage. Shortly after their intimate night together, Elizabeth discovered that she was pregnant. News of Elizabeth's pregnancy spread like wildfire throughout the kingdom, a beacon of hope and joy in a land that had endured so much suffering. As the people rejoiced at the prospect of an heir, both Henry and Elizabeth felt the weight of their responsibility. They knew that the future of their dynasty rested on this child, and they approached parenthood with reverence and care. Sadly, their first child together, a son, was stillborn in June of 1486. However, Elizabeth went on to give birth to 2 more children, a daughter named Margaret and then another son, born in September of 1492. The young prince's arrival was a momentous occasion, a cause for celebration and thanksgiving throughout the land. His birth was seen as a blessing, a symbol of hope and prosperity for the kingdom. The people of England took great pride in their new prince, and they eagerly anticipated the day when he would ascend to the throne. As the young prince grew, he was carefully prepared for his future role as king. He received the finest education, learning the skills and knowledge necessary to govern a kingdom. His tutors were some of the brightest minds in England, and they imparted their wisdom and expertise to the young prince. As Margaret watched her grandson being educated, she knew that the future of the Tudor dynasty was in good hands. Throughout Henry VII's reign, Margaret remained a steadfast presence in his life, offering him guidance and support as he navigated the challenges of being a young king. She had played a vital role in securing the throne for him, and she was determined to ensure his success. Lady Margaret Beaufort died on June 1509 at Westhorpe Manor in Yorkshire. She had lived a long and eventful life, witnessing major historical events and playing a key role in shaping the future of England. Yet despite her many accomplishments and contributions, she remained humble and devout. As we conclude our exploration of Lady Margaret Beaufort's remarkable life, it is important to remember the profound impact she had on history. Not only was she a key player in the downfall of the Plantagenet dynasty and the establishment of the Tudor era, but she also played a crucial role in the life of her son, Henry VII. Her unwavering support and guidance helped him navigate the treacherous waters of the English court and ultimately secure the throne. Without her help, it is doubtful that the Tudor dynasty would have lasted for so long or had such a profound impact on English history. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of Lady Margaret Beaufort. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more fascinating historical tales.